Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 13, The Behavior of a Perfect Person, text number 9. Nayatir Ashrama Praya Dharma Hetur Mahatmanaha Shantasya Sama Chitasya Vibriyad Yuta Vatyajet Niyatir Ashrama Prayo Dharma Hetur Mahatmanaha Shantasya Sama Chitasya Vibriyad Yuta Vatyajet
Shantasya Samachitasya Nayate Ashrama Prayo Dharma Hetu Mahatmana Shantasya Samachitasya
Ladies, Mataji. Dharma Hetur Mahatmana Shantasya Samachitasya Vibriyad Utat Vachajet. Ayater Ashrama Prayo Dharma Hetur Mahatmanaha Santasya Samachitasya Vibrayad Yuta Vachayat Na Yate of the sannyasi Ashramaha, the symbolic dress Udanda and Kamandulu Praya, almost always. Dharma Hetu, the cause of advancement in spiritual life. Mahatmanaha, one who is factually exalted and advanced. Shantasya, who is peaceful. Samachitasya, who has attained the stage of being equipoised. Vibriyat, one may accept such symbolic signs. Uta, indeed. Va, or. Tyajet, one may give up. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A peaceful, equipoised person who is factually advanced in spiritual consciousness does not need to accept the symbols of a sannyasi, such as the Tridanda and Kamandula. According to necessity, he may sometimes accept these symbols and sometimes reject them. Purport: there are 4 stages of the renounced order of life: Kutichak, Bahudak, Paribhajakacharya, and Paramahansa. Herein, Srimad Bhagavatam considers the Paramahamsas among the sannyasis. Mayavadis and impersonalists, sannyasis, cannot attain the Paramahamsa stage. This is because of their impersonal conception of the absolute truth. Prameti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdite. The absolute truth is perceived in three stages, of which Bhagavan, or realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is meant for the Paramahamsas. Indeed, Srimad Bhagavatam itself is meant for the Paramahamsas. Paramo nimatsaranam satam. That's when it is in the Paramahamsa stage, is not eligible to understand the Srimad Bhagavatam. For Paramahamsas or sannyasis in the Vaishnava order, preaching is the first duty. To preach, such sannyasis may accept the symbols of sannyas, such as the danda and kaman and dalu. Or sometimes they may not. Generally, the Vaishnava sannyasis, being Paramahamsas, are automatically called Babajis. They do not carry a kamandulo or danda. Such a sannyasi is free to accept or reject the marks of sannyas. His only thought is, where is there an opportunity to spread Krishna consciousness? Sometimes the Krishna consciousness movement sends representative sannyasis to foreign countries where the danda and kamandulu are not very much appreciated. We send our preachers in ordinary dress to introduce our books and philosophy. Our only concern is to attract people to Krishna consciousness. We may do this in the dress of sannyasis or in the regular dress of gentlemen. Our only concern is to spread interest in Krishna consciousness. Niyatir ashrama prayo dharma hetur mahatmanaha santasya samachitasya bibriyad uta vatyajet. Peaceful, equipoised person who's factually advanced in spiritual consciousness does not need to accept the symbols of sannyasi, such as tridanda and kamandulu. According to necessity, he may sometimes accept these symbols and sometimes reject them. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Janamane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskajade Sakarna. In the Vedic culture, people dress a certain way. They even have their hair in a certain way, as to indicate who they are and what their status is. Prabhupada said that in India, for instance, even the ladies, they'd wear their hair in a certain way to indicate what their status is. If their hair was parted in the middle, if their hair was parted in such a way and they had this red dot or this red line there, that indicated that they were married. If their hair was parted in the middle, that indicated that they were a prostitute. And there are other markings for everyone. In other words, the Vedic culture was meant to give people a good indication of what was going on. Therefore, the dress of a sannyasi was there in order to indicate that they were a sannyasi, that they weren't going to get married, and therefore it was a good indication for the ladies that this was probably not an eligible candidate for marriage. Similarly, we had brahmacharis, and they were actually brahmacharis, and therefore it indicated also that this was not an eligible person for household life. And even in the Vedic culture, the ladies weren't out on the street looking for a husband. Their fathers and mothers made the arrangements. Not only, they didn't wait until they were 55 years old before they decided to get married. I think I should get married. No, the marriages were arranged. Prabhupada said, I think he was married when he was 10 years old, and his wife was 8. Of course, they'd get arrested if you do that nowadays. But because 8-year-old and 10 years old didn't live together. But the lady, the child, she knew that this is my husband, and she was peaceful. She didn't think, well, when I grow up, I got to search for a husband. But she was peaceful, and she served her husband, even though he was 10 years old, by bringing some prasadam. That way, some attachment. The husband thought, well, here's some prasadam. So he became attached. Hopefully it was good prasadam, or else it wasn't a very happy marriage. In any case, ladies, they learned how to cook, because by learning how to cook nicely, they could actually capture the heart of the man. Material life is not really so romantic as some people make it out to be. If you're a good cook, you can capture anyone's heart. People have their heart is not that deep usually. It's very close to their tongue. And that way, Vedic culture was such that arrangements were made and people were peaceful. They could regulate their lives, and they were living all together. So the elders made sure that the youngers were trained up properly from the very beginning of life. Wasn't that, well, because they had the grandmother and grandfather on both sides there and all the cousins, they're all living together. Therefore, they took care of each other and they watched out for each other. And they had experience that all this desires that one may have when one is younger is not exactly the same desires they're going to have when they're older. They should try to make their lives in such a way as to make it successful at the end, not simply enjoyment at the beginning and frustration at the end. So everyone was guided, and there were different orders. In every one of these brahmachari life, there were different orders. In vanaprastha, in grihastha life, there are different occupations. In vanaprastha, there are different orders. And in sannyasa, there are different orders, and these are the main ones. Because you don't automatically, just by getting a danda or a kamandalu, you become renounced. Prabhupada gives the example of one householder. He didn't really want to work very hard in India. So during the day, he put on the dress of a sannyasi and go and beg. And at night, when he came back home, then he put on the dress of a householder to be with his family. He took it as an occupation, begging. And as a dressed as a sannyasi, you probably get more than as a householder. But this is not what sannyasa is meant for. And indeed, in the Vedic culture, one would get arrested for such behavior. But a modern society would think, well, that was pretty clever. Maybe I should do it too. Maybe I'll go as his brahmachari assistant. Although I'm 79 years old. Indeed, Arjuna, at the end of Dwapara Yuga, he dressed himself as a sannyasi in order to capture Subhadra. Because Krishna advised Arjuna that Balaram was attached to giving Subhadra away to Duryodhana, somehow or another. Well, Balaram, I guess this is all pastime. But you wonder about him sometimes. He's supposed to know something. After all, his just plenary expansion is a super soul in everyone's heart. And yet he trained up Duryodhana in club fighting. And he wanted Subhadra to marry Duryodhana. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. I'm sure it was transcendental, though, for Krishna's pastime. In any case, Arjuna wanted Subhadra, this inconceivable romantic platform, on the transcendental platform. Arjuna is a pure devotee. And Subhadra is Krishna's internal energy. She's Yogamaya. She's the auspicious part of Durga. Therefore, she's called Subhadra instead of just Bhadra or Durga. In any case, inconceivable to me at least, Arjuna fell in love with Subhadra. But I guess we're supposed to fall in love with Subhadra too. But not necessarily to take her as our wife, but one could fall in love with Subhadra, his life is perfect. If you fall in love with the internal energy of Krishna, you're doing quite well. In any case, Arjuna, on Krishna's advice, disguised himself as a sannyasi. And Balaram, and he came during Chaturamasya, and he was staying with Balaram. At least he was taking prasadam with Balaram. And Balaram didn't recognize him as Arjuna. Either he had an amazingly good disguise, or Krishna covered him over, or maybe Subhadra covered Yogamaya covered him. In any case, Arjuna didn't look like an ordinary sannyasi because he was powerfully built like a kshatriya. He was a real kshatriya. Anyone who could fight 18 days in a row, even day and night, shooting arrows and killing hundreds and thousands of people, didn't have a little weak body, you know. Been out here for 15 minutes. It was really a tough business. No, he was a powerful kshatriya, completely empowered by Krishna. But somehow or another, Balaram didn't recognize him. Neither did Subhadra, but she fell in love with him because of his very powerful build, and he was Krishna's pure devotee. In any case, when Arjuna, on the advice of Krishna, with the permission of Vasudeva and Devaki, Arjuna stole Subhadra, kidnapped her, Balaram became infuriated. He didn't think, well, it's Arjuna, he's a pure devotee, what the heck, you know. No, he was going to kill Arjuna, stealing Subhadra, until Krishna fell at his feet and asked Balaram to forgive Arjuna and tell him that actually Subhadra was attracted to Krishna. And then Balaram said, all right. Balaram even gave a dowry to Subhadra. So generally speaking, people didn't imitate other orders of life, except if you have in Satyuga, I guess. Well, I guess Prithu Maharaj must have been in, I don't know, I think it was Satyuga. It was probably Treta Yuga, because he was performing sacrifices. And he got up to, I think, 99 sacrifices. And Indra had performed 100. And here every week we have one, so we're up to 108 so far. That's right. Luckily, Indra, our sacrifice is not up to the standard that make Indra angry or anything. Steal our bricks or something. So he got up to 99. Indra became envious. This man is going to surpass my record. I got the universal record for sacrifices, and he's going to surpass it. And in the sacrifice, you have a horse. And in order to test whether the sacrifice is going to be successful or not, because it didn't depend upon how many bricks you had, even if they were made out of gold, or how much ghee you had. It all depended upon the purity of the chanting by the Brahmins. The Brahmins, their mantras actually made the sacrifice. The other things were just formality. In order to test the prowess of the Brahmins, they'd sacrifice one cow or one horse, and then, in this case, it was a horse, Ashvamedha sacrifice. And then the Brahmins would have to chant mantras in order to bring the horse back to life again. in a younger body. Therefore, Indra, in order to stop the sacrifice, stole the horse. And Prithvi Maharaj's son could also fly in the air, chase after Indra. And Indra, in order to bewilder, I forget his name, Janmanjaya or something, he disguised himself in different renounced ways and created different bogus sannyas orders. So if you see any bogus sannyas order, probably Indra is behind the whole thing. So you can know who to go to. In any case, this happened a number of times, till finally they decided, all right, we've had enough with Indra stealing the horse, and Prithvi Maharaj just had the Brahmins say, chant this mantra by which Indra will become the oblation. He'll be thrown into the fire. So the Brahmins were so powerful that they could chant the mantra that Indra would be thrown into the fire and burned to a crisp. I mean, if you learn those mantras, you don't have much to worry about. You say, throw some samosas into the fire, just enough to get cooked. If you know those mantras, you'll never go hungry. In any case, all these sannyasis, the false sannyasis, are very prevalent in Kali Yuga, especially Mayavadi sannyasi, as we see Mayavadi sannyasis, that in Banaras there are only Mayavadi sannyasis, headed by Prahladananda Saraswati. And they were actually sannyasis, but Mayavadi sannyasis. In other words, they were quite austere. They hardly ate, they hardly slept, they studied Vedanta all day long. They were actually serious about realizing Brahman, and therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually converted them into Vaishnavas. Not so difficult. He didn't have to give them japa lessons and then tell them about deity worship. And just by preaching to them a little, they caught on immediately because they were actually on the liberated, something beyond sense gratification at that time. Maybe not liberated, but they could much more easily than we can become pure, devotees at least, some kind of devotees. And understand the philosophy, because when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told them the actual imports of Vedanta, they immediately accepted it. They didn't argue with him. Because if Krishna himself talks to you, he's quite powerful in his presentation. He's been doing this since time immemorial, converting Mayavadi sannyasis. So he knows exactly where they're at. In any case, we should understand what these different orders of life are, and that ultimately Paramahamsa is meant for preaching. Of course, Parabhajacharya is the ones who are actually generally preaching, but Paramahamsas are the most effective preachers because they actually know what they're talking about. It's not just theory, it's actually experience. And therefore they can have the most powerful effect upon their audience because they're talking by their realization. And this is what Prabhupada explains, is that generally speaking, our sannyasis are made on the Parabhajacharya platform, that is on the platform of Madhyam Adhikar. We're loving Krishna by serving his mission, especially the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, trying to cooperate with the devotees to serve cooperatively in that mission, because part of that mission is to show how people can cooperate. In the material world, no one cooperates. Everyone's envious of each other. Everyone's in competition with each other. So there must be something different that in the energy, if people could actually cooperate for some spiritual objective. And that cooperation is meant to help each other become Krishna conscious and to help innocent people take to the process of devotional service and ultimately defeat the atheistic propaganda that there is no God or that everyone is God, or my goat is God, goat Narayan. So that's what Parabhadakacharya is meant for. But if they work on that platform, on the liberated platform, because that's the vision of a liberated soul, then gradually they'll become Paramahamsas and their preaching potency will increase. As they're working on that platform, Paramahamsa means Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyakta karotiya lipyatena sapapena patram ivambasa. Patram padmam ivambasa. Just like one who's unattached to the fruits of his work, just like the lotus leaf is untouched by water. That was that Brahmanyare karmani sangam tyakta karotiya. That the liberated person acting in Krishna consciousness one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So just the attempt to fully engage in Krishna consciousness will gradually bring one to the spiritual platform of experience. And by transcendental experience, one is able to inspire others to take up the process to actually get some transcendental experience. Otherwise, if we don't have transcendental experience, then it's very hard to tell others convincingly that they should give up everything to get transcendental experience. Then they may question, well, why don't you have transcendental experience? Why don't you give up everything and get it? But if one is actually can show the example of giving up materialistic desires, materialistic endeavors, in order to come to the platform of Krishna consciousness, then the result is that it's possible to convince others to do it also. Someone's trying to communicate something to us. All right, so I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? The other factor, one other factor is that we shouldn't just probably give some examples here that sannyasis, they don't always have to dress as a sannyasi, or if you go on book distribution, you don't have to dress necessarily as the devotee. So I just I go to the store to buy something, and I just put on devotion, I put on regular clothes, that way people will give me a better deal. No, I mean, we have to be careful that we do things in order to spread Krishna consciousness, not to disguise ourselves as non-devotees. Otherwise, we'll get into trouble. Sannyasi never wears sannyas dress, even when he's supposed to. Then there must be some other motivation for doing it, other than spreading Krishna consciousness. And then one becomes vulnerable to the allurements of material energy because the motivation is wrong. And one goes on book distribution and dresses as a regular person and decides that he's only going to distribute to the ladies because they're the most compassionate. Then he's going to get into difficulty. Or they're the easiest to get a donation from, usually. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions?
Regarding your last point, so is there actually any effect or benefit if we try to preach something that actually we don't experience?
Probably not. I mean, you tell people about what the gopis' feelings are in Goloka Vrindavan at night during the rasa dance, probably won't have any effect. It'll probably have a negative effect. And we try to explain to people, we're not this body, the body's changing. I mean, that's within everyone's realm of experience. So we should tell people something we know about. Otherwise, we'll get bewildered ourselves trying to explain it. Especially the reaction probably won't be so encouraging, and then we'll become discouraged. It's like shooting arrows. When Indra was fighting against one demon, Namuchi, Indra was famous because he had his thunderbolt weapon, and no one could avoid it. So eventually he threw the thunderbolt weapon at Namuchi, and it bounced back. So he was really discouraged. So we throw our transcendental mantras of transcendental realization at people, and they bounce back at us. We'll get discouraged. Because Indra, he had some friends in the heavenly planet, so they told him that someone gave him Namuchi the benediction, he wouldn't be killed by anything solid or anything liquid. So then Indra threw a foam weapon at him and cut off his head. Because foam is neither solid nor liquid. But we may not have such friends tell us these things. So we should try to throw mantras at work. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande.